I stood in that elevator at Core Tech Solutions headquarters with tears streaming down my cheeks, my hands trembling as I pressed the button for the 15th floor. Just moments before Derek Patterson had screamed at me in front of our entire IT department, his voice echoing through the open workspace like a thunderclap. "You're just a worthless technician, Edith. Get lost and stop pretending you know anything about real technology." His words cut deeper than any blade, especially since I had only been trying to help fix the critical server issue that was bringing our whole network down. As those elevator doors slid shut, I could still hear him bragging to his buddies about how he was going to make sure I got fired for stepping out of my lane. What Derek Patterson didn't know about me could fill entire libraries. My name is Edith Thompson, and at 28 years old, I've lived a life that most people couldn't imagine. While other kids were playing video games and watching cartoons, I was moving from embassy to embassy, country to country as the daughter of a career diplomat. By the time I turned 18, I had called 7 different nations home and absorbed 12 languages like a sponge soaks up water. My father, Ambassador Richard Thompson, had been stationed everywhere from tiny Balkan republics to major European capitals. Each move meant new schools, new cultures, and new tongues to master. I discovered early that I possessed an almost supernatural gift for languages. Where other diplomatic children struggled with basic conversational skills, I would become fluent within months, picking up not just vocabulary and grammar, but the subtle cultural nuances that made the difference between communication and true understanding. But that charmed life came crashing down during my senior year of high school. Dad made a critical error in judgment during sensitive peace negotiations, and suddenly, our family name became synonymous with diplomatic failure. The scandal followed us everywhere. When I graduated, instead of leveraging my unique background and linguistic abilities for some prestigious international career, I deliberately chose to disappear into anonymity. That's how I ended up at Core Tech Solutions, working as a senior IT technician. Most people saw it as beneath my education level, but I found peace in the logical world of servers, networks, and code. Technology didn't care about your family's reputation or your father's mistakes. It either worked or it didn't, and I was exceptionally good at making it work. Core Tech was no small operation. We were one of the leading technology infrastructure companies in the Pacific Northwest, providing enterprise solutions to major corporations across 3 time zones. The company employed over 800 people across multiple departments, and we were on the verge of signing the largest international contract in our 15-year history. Which brought me to Derek Patterson, the 26-year-old nightmare who had made my professional life absolutely miserable for the past 8 months. Derek was the son of Michael Patterson, our vice president of business development, and everyone knew he had landed his position as senior systems coordinator through pure nepotism. The guy couldn't configure a basic router without calling for help, but somehow he had been put in charge of major technical presentations. Derek stood about 6 feet tall with perfectly styled blonde hair that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a week. He wore expensive suits that couldn't hide his complete lack of competence, and he had this habit of speaking loudly about technical subjects he clearly didn't understand. Every conversation with him felt like watching someone try to perform surgery with a butter knife. The incident that led to my elevator breakdown had started innocently enough. Our main server cluster had begun throwing critical errors around 2 in the afternoon, right in the middle of a major data processing cycle. The error messages were appearing in rapid succession, and I could see that we were heading toward a complete system failure that would affect hundreds of clients. I had immediately begun diagnostic procedures tracing the problem back to some unauthorized software that had been installed on the primary node. When I checked the installation logs, I discovered that the problematic software had been added using Derek's administrative credentials just 3 hours earlier. It was clearly an amateur mistake, the kind of thing that happened when someone with insufficient knowledge tried to install programs without understanding dependency requirements. Being the professional that I was, I had approached Derek quietly at his cubicle, intending to let him know about the issue and help him resolve it without making a scene. Hey, Derek, I had said softly, I think there might be an issue with some software that was installed on the main server this morning. Would you mind taking a look at the logs with me? That's when Derek had exploded. He jumped up from his chair like I had accused him of committing murder, his face turning bright red as he shouted loud enough for 3 departments to hear. What are you talking about? I didn't install anything, and even if I did, what business is it of yours? You're just a technician. Stay in your lane and stop trying to make me look bad. The entire floor had gone silent. Sarah Chen, our brilliant systems analyst, had looked up from her workstation with wide eyes. Marcus Williams, our network administrator and one of the most respected tech professionals in the building, had actually stood up from his desk to see what the commotion was about. Even people from accounting and marketing had poked their heads out of their offices to witness the spectacle. But Derek wasn't finished. I'm sick of you always trying to show off, Edith. You think you're so smart, but you're just a worthless technician who doesn't understand how real business works. Get lost and let the actual professionals handle this. As I stood there in shocked silence, Derek had turned to his colleagues with a smirk. Some people just don't know their place in this company. Don't worry, I'll make sure HR knows about this insubordination. Maybe it's time we found someone who actually respects the chain of command. That's when I had fled to the elevator, my cheeks burning with humiliation and my career seemingly hanging in the balance. But as I returned to my desk 30 minutes later, trying to compose myself and figure out how to salvage the server situation, I discovered that Derek hadn't just threatened me with HR action, he had actually followed through. Sitting in my email inbox was a formal complaint sent to our human resources department with copies to his father and our CEO. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation and lies. Derek claimed that I had deliberately sabotaged company systems to make him look incompetent, that I had shown repeated insubordination and disrespect for management hierarchy, and that I represented a serious threat to team morale and professional standards. The HR response was swift and terrifying. I had 24 hours to provide a written response to these allegations or face immediate termination. My hands were shaking as I read those words. 24 hours to save my career from someone who was protected by family connections and corporate politics. But as I sat there contemplating my response, I heard Derek's voice drifting over the cubicle wall behind me. He was speaking in broken, heavily accented Russian, clearly reading from some kind of script or translation app. Dada, very good business tomorrow. I will impress the Eastern European delegates with my technical presentation. They will see that core tech has very smart leadership. I froze in my chair, my linguistic instincts immediately analyzing what I had just heard. Derek's pronunciation was terrible. His grammar was completely wrong, and he was using formal Russian constructions that would sound ridiculous in a business setting. But more importantly, he was preparing for tomorrow's crucial international delegation meeting by studying the wrong language entirely. You see, core tech's biggest potential contract was with a consortium of companies from a small Balkan nation. And I happen to know from my years living in that exact region that they didn't speak Russian at all. They had their own distinct language, a beautiful and complex tongue that I had learned fluently during 2 years of my childhood when Dad was stationed at the embassy there. Derek Patterson, in his arrogant assumption that all Eastern Europeans spoke Russian, was preparing to make a complete fool of himself in front of the most important business partners in Cortex history. And based on his phone conversation, he was planning to take full credit for the entire technical infrastructure presentation. Suddenly, my 24-hour deadline didn't seem quite so terrifying. In fact, it was starting to look like an opportunity. That evening, I stayed late in the office long after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. The building felt different in the darkness, more intimate somehow, as if the empty hallways were keeping my secrets safe. I had work to do, research that could change everything about tomorrow's crucial meeting. Using my administrative access to the company database, I began pulling up every piece of information I could find about our potential international partners. The delegation was representing a consortium called Adriatic Tech Solutions, based in a small Balkan republic that had gained independence only 30 years earlier. Their primary business involved advanced cybersecurity solutions and data protection services for European corporations. As I scrolled through their corporate profiles, memories came flooding back like scenes from a half forgotten movie. I had been 14 when Dad was stationed in that country, old enough to appreciate the complex political landscape, but young enough to absorb the language and culture without conscious effort. Those had been two of the happiest years of my childhood, living in a beautiful hillside villa overlooking the Adriatic Sea, attending an international school where I had made friends who spoke four different languages fluently. The delegation's leader was Dr. Anna Mihajlovic, a woman about my father's age who had built her technology company from nothing after the war. Her biography was impressive computer science PhD from Belgrade University, former professor of cybersecurity, holder of dozen patents in data encryption. The kind of person who had earned every ounce of respect through pure competence and innovation. Looking at her photograph, I felt a strange sense of familiarity, though I couldn't place exactly where I might have encountered her before. She had intelligent eyes and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of fighting for recognition in a male-dominated field. My linguistic memories were crystal clear even after all these years. The language Derek thought was Russian bore about as much resemblance to actual Balkan dialects as French did to Mandarin Chinese. It belonged to a completely different language family with unique grammatical structures and a vocabulary that reflected centuries of distinct cultural development. I spent 2 hours refreshing my fluency, reading online newspapers, and watching recent interviews with government officials to catch up on modern terminology and current events. Languages are living things that evolve constantly, and I wanted to make sure my childhood knowledge was still relevant for contemporary business discussions. But as I researched, I also uncovered something far more troubling than Derek's linguistic incompetence. Buried deep in the technical documentation for tomorrow's presentation, I found references to system configurations and security protocols that didn't match our actual infrastructure. Someone had been providing outdated and potentially misleading information about our capabilities. The discrepancies were subtle, the kind of thing that would only be noticed by someone with deep technical knowledge and access to our real system specifications. But they were serious enough that any competent cybersecurity expert would spot the inconsistencies immediately. Following the digital trail backwards, I discovered that Derek had been corresponding with external contacts about our technical systems, sharing detailed information that should never have left our secure network. The email exchanges were encrypted, written in basic Russian that I could easily decipher, and they painted a picture of systematic corporate espionage. Derek had been selling our technical specifications to competitors, providing them with inside knowledge about our security measures, client protocols, and infrastructure capabilities. The money trail led to offshore accounts and cryptocurrency transactions that would have been invisible to anyone without my particular combination of technical skills and linguistic abilities. But the most damning discovery came when I found references to tomorrow's delegation meeting. Derek's external contacts knew about the Adriatic Tech Solutions visit, knew about the potential contract value, and were actively working to sabotage our negotiations. Derek wasn't just incompetent. He was a deliberate traitor who was using his protected position to undermine the company that employed him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I was being threatened with termination for trying to fix his technical mistakes, Derek was systematically destroying core tech from the inside. His public humiliation of me wasn't just about protecting his ego. It was about eliminating anyone who might discover his criminal activities. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence on my computer screen. I had enough information to destroy Derek's career and probably send him to federal prison. But I also knew that confronting him directly would expose my ability to read his encrypted foreign language communications, revealing linguistic skills that I had kept carefully hidden for years. The smart thing would be to take this evidence to CEO Janet Rodriguez immediately. She was known for her no nonsense approach to business and her intolerance for any form of corporate misconduct. Janet had built Cortec from a small startup into a major regional player through pure determination and ethical business practices. But I also knew that Janet trusted Michael Patterson, Derek's father, implicitly. The two of them had worked together for over a decade, and VP Patterson was considered one of the company's most valuable executives. Without incontrovertible proof of his son's crimes, my accusations might be dismissed as the desperate lies of an employee facing termination. As I gathered my research and prepared to leave the office, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of rushing to expose Derek's crimes immediately, I would wait for tomorrow's delegation meeting. I would let Derek's linguistic incompetence and technical ignorance speak for themselves, creating an opportunity to reveal his treachery in front of witnesses who couldn't be manipulated or dismissed. The Adriatic Tech Solutions delegation deserved to know who they were really dealing with. And Derek Patterson was about to discover that underestimating people could be the biggest mistake of his privileged life. My walk to the parking garage felt different than usual, charged with anticipation and nervous energy. For the first time in months, I wasn't dreading tomorrow's workday. Instead, I was looking forward to it with the kind of excitement that comes from knowing you're about to right a serious wrong. Derek thought he had destroyed my career with his lies and corporate connections, but he had actually given me the perfect opportunity to expose his crimes while protecting the company and colleagues I genuinely cared about. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, and Derek Patterson had no idea what was coming for him. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp Pacific Northwest clarity that makes Seattle's reputation for rain seem like a cruel joke. I arrived at Cortec headquarters an hour earlier than usual, wanting to observe the delegation's arrival and Derek's preparations without drawing attention to myself. The executive conference room on the 20th floor had been transformed for the occasion. Fresh flowers adorned the mahogany table. Presentation screens had been polished to perfection, and someone had even arranged for catered breakfast pastries that probably cost more than I made in a day. Everything looked professional and welcoming, exactly the kind of setup designed to impress international business partners. Derek strutted around the conference room like a peacock preparing for mating season, checking and rechecking his presentation materials while practicing phrases from what was obviously a Russian language app on his phone. His confidence was almost impressive if you ignored the fact that he was preparing to greet Balkan business leaders in the wrong language entirely. Zdravstvuyte, my name is Derek Patterson, he muttered to himself, butchering the pronunciation so badly that it sounded like he was clearing his throat. I am very pleased to meet with your distinguished delegation today. I watched this performance from my temporary workstation near the back of the room, officially assigned to provide technical support during the presentation. In corporate terms, this meant I was supposed to remain invisible unless someone needed help connecting a laptop or adjusting the projector settings. At exactly 9:30, the Adriatic Tech Solutions delegation arrived, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Dr. Anna Mihailovich entered the conference room with the kind of presence that immediately commanded respect. She wore a perfectly tailored navy business suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned every professional achievement through pure competence. Behind her came 4 associates, 2 men and 2 women, all impeccably dressed and clearly intelligent. They moved with the efficient coordination of a team that had worked together for years, setting down their materials and surveying the room with the practiced eyes of experienced negotiators. Derek immediately launched into his greeting, stepping forward with the kind of aggressive enthusiasm that Americans often mistake for confidence. Zdravstvuyte. Welcome to Core Tech Solutions. I am Derek Patterson, and I am very excited for our business meeting today. The delegation exchanged glances that I recognized immediately. They were trying to be polite, but Derek's mangled Russian pronunciation had clearly confused them. Dr. Mihajlovich responded in perfect English, her accent elegant and barely noticeable. Thank you for your welcome, Mr. Patterson. We are pleased to be here and look forward to learning more about your technical capabilities. Derek's face flushed, slightly clearly thrown off by her English response when he had been prepared for Russian conversation. But he recovered quickly, launching into his prepared presentation about Cortex, infrastructure, and security systems. What followed was 45 minutes of technical incompetence masquerading as expertise. Derek threw around buzzwords he clearly didn't understand, made claims about our systems that were either exaggerated or completely false, and demonstrated a level of ignorance that would have been embarrassing in a first-year computer science student. But the delegation was professional, asking pointed questions and taking careful notes. Dr. Mihajlovich in particular seemed to be analyzing every word Derek spoke, her expression growing more skeptical with each passing minute. Mr. Patterson, she said during a brief pause, your encryption protocols seem quite advanced on paper. Could you explain how you handle key management for international data transfers? Derek's pause was just a fraction too long, his answer just a bit too vague. Well, that's handled by our technical team using industry standard procedures. We have very robust security measures in place. I winced internally. Key management was my specialty, and Derek's non-answer revealed that he had no understanding of one of the most critical aspects of cybersecurity. Dr. Mihailovich's slight frown suggested she had noticed the same thing. As the morning session continued, I began to understand why the delegation had seemed frustrated in Derek's emails to his criminal contacts. They were clearly experts in their field, asking sophisticated questions that revealed deep technical knowledge. Derek was trying to snow them with corporate buzzwords and generic presentations, but they saw right through his incompetence. During the coffee break, I overheard VP Michael Patterson speaking quietly with Derek near the windows overlooking the city. Son, they seem a bit skeptical about some of your technical explanations. Maybe we should bring in Edith or Marcus to help with the more detailed questions. Derek's response was immediate and defensive. Dad, I've got this under control. They're just trying to test our knowledge. I can handle any questions they throw at me. Besides, we can't let the technical staff start making decisions about major business deals. But I could see the concern in VP Patterson's eyes. This contract was worth $25 million over 3 years, the kind of deal that could define Cortex's future growth trajectory. If the delegation walked away unsatisfied, it wouldn't just hurt Derek's reputation, it would devastate the entire company's international expansion plans. As the afternoon session began, Derek attempted to demonstrate our actual security systems using the main conference room display. He connected his laptop with visible confidence, clearly believing that a live demonstration would overcome any doubts about his technical competence. That's when everything started to fall apart. The screen immediately filled with error messages and system alerts that Derek clearly didn't recognize. Instead of our sleek security interface, we were looking at a cascade of warnings about unauthorized access attempts, failed authentication protocols, and potential data breaches. Derek's face went pale as he frantically clicked through menus trying to make the errors disappear, but his efforts only made things worse, triggering additional alerts and causing the system to lock him out entirely. Dr. Mihailovich leaned forward in her chair, her expression sharpening with professional interest. Mr. Patterson, these security alerts suggest that your system is currently under active attack. Are these normal operational messages? No, Derek stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. This is just a minor technical glitch. Our systems are completely secure. This kind of thing happens all the time. But Dr. Mihajlovich was clearly not satisfied with that explanation. She turned to one of her associates and spoke several words in their native language, words that made my heart race, because I understood every syllable. This is not a professional operation, Stefan. Their security expert doesn't understand his own systems. We should terminate these discussions and proceed with the alternative proposal. The other delegation members nodded agreement, and I watched as they began gathering their materials with the efficient movements of people preparing to leave. $25 million was about to walk out the door because Derek Patterson was too arrogant and incompetent to admit he needed help. That's when Derek made his final fatal mistake. As Dr. Mihajlovic stood to address the room, clearly preparing to announce their departure, Derek panicked and pointed directly at me. The technical problems are because of her, he declared, his voice cracking with desperation. Edith has been sabotaging our systems to make me look bad. She's the one responsible for these security alerts. The entire room went silent. VP Patterson's face went white with shock. Dr. Mihajlovic turned to look at me with raised eyebrows, clearly wondering why a technical support person was being blamed for major system failures. Derek continued his desperate attack, seemingly oblivious to how ridiculous he sounded. She's been jealous of my position since day one, always trying to undermine my authority. These security problems are her fault, not mine. As Derek's accusations echoed through the conference room, I felt something inside me snap. Not anger exactly, but a calm determination that surprised me with its intensity. Derek had just given me the perfect opening, and Dr. Mihajlovic was looking directly at me with the kind of intelligent curiosity that suggested she was ready to hear the truth. I stood up from my workstation in the back of the room and walked forward with steady steps, my linguistic abilities and technical knowledge combining into a weapon that Derek Patterson could never have anticipated. It was time to show everyone exactly who they were dealing with. The conference room felt frozen in time as I walked toward the front, every eye tracking my movement with curiosity and confusion. Derek's face showed a mixture of panic and arrogance, clearly believing that his attack on me would deflect attention from his own failures. VP Patterson looked mortified by his son's public accusation, while Dr. Mihajlovic watched me approach with the kind of analytical interest that intelligent people show when they sense an unexpected development. I stopped directly in front of the main presentation screen where Derek's technical failures were still displaying cascading error messages. The security alerts continued to flash red warnings about unauthorized access attempts, painting a picture of system vulnerability that no competent cybersecurity expert could ignore. Dr. Mihajlovic, I said, looking directly at her with steady eye contact. Before you and your delegation leave, I think you should understand exactly what these security alerts represent and who is really responsible for them. Derek jumped forward, his face flushed with anger. Edith, you don't have permission to speak to our guests. Get back to your workstation and let the professionals handle this situation. But Dr. Mihajlovic raised her hand slightly, a gesture that commanded immediate silence. Mr. Patterson, I would like to hear what your technical specialist has to say about these system alerts. In my experience, the people who actually work with security systems often have the most accurate understanding of potential problems. I took a deep breath and made the decision that would change everything. Looking directly at Dr. Mihajlovic, I began speaking in her native language with the fluent precision that had taken me years to develop. Dr. Mihajlovic, with your permission, I can demonstrate exactly how these security breaches occurred and who has been systematically compromising Cortex data protection protocols. The reaction in the room was instantaneous and dramatic. Derek's mouth fell open in shock, his confident expression crumbling as he realized I had just spoken in fluent Balkan dialect. VP Patterson stared at me with complete bewilderment, clearly struggling to understand how his technical support employee was conducting business negotiations in a foreign language. But Dr. Mihailovic's response was the most telling. Her eyes widened with recognition and respect, and she replied in the same language with obvious pleasure. Your pronunciation is excellent, young lady. Where did you learn to speak our language with such precision? Continuing in her dialect, I explained briefly about my diplomatic background and my years living in her country. I spent 2 years in your beautiful nation when my father was stationed at the American Embassy. Your language and culture made a lasting impression on me. The other delegation members were now leaning forward with obvious interest, speaking quietly among themselves in their native tongue. I caught fragments of their conversation, surprise at meeting an American who spoke their language fluently, curiosity about my background, and growing skepticism about Derek's claims of technical expertise. Derek, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly agitated as he realized that an entire conversation was taking place that he couldn't understand or control. "What are you doing, Edith? This is completely inappropriate. You're not authorized to conduct business negotiations." I turned back to address him in English, my voice calm but firm. "Derek, I'm not conducting negotiations. I'm preventing a catastrophic failure of corporate security by exposing the real source of these system breaches." Moving to the presentation computer, I began pulling up system logs and administrative records with the kind of technical fluency that comes from years of hands-on experience. "Dr. Mihajlovic, these security alerts aren't random system errors. They're the result of specific, unauthorized software installations and data access patterns that I can trace directly to their source." As I navigated through the technical interfaces explaining my findings in both English and Balkan dialect for the delegation's benefit, Derek's panic became increasingly obvious. He tried repeatedly to interrupt my demonstration, claiming I was sabotaging the presentation and making false accusations. But Dr. Mihajlovic was watching my work with the focused attention of a true expert. She asked pointed questions about encryption protocols, data handling procedures, and network security measures that demonstrated her own deep technical knowledge. "Your analysis is very thorough," she said, switching between English and her native language as the conversation required. "These data access patterns suggest systematic information gathering rather than random system errors." I nodded, pulling up additional evidence from the server logs. "Exactly. Someone with administrative access has been systematically copying technical specifications, client data, and security protocols over the past 6 months. The unauthorized software installation this week was just the latest in a series of increasingly careless attempts to extract company information." Derek's face had gone completely white, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he realized I was building an irrefutable case against him. "This is ridiculous. Edith is obviously making these things up to deflect attention from her own mistakes." But as I continued my demonstration, showing timestamp evidence and correlation patterns that painted a clear picture of deliberate data theft, even VP Patterson began to understand the seriousness of what I was revealing. Dr. Mihailovich stood and walked closer to the presentation screen, examining the evidence with professional interest. "Mr. Patterson," she said, addressing Derek directly, "these logs suggest that someone has been sharing your technical specifications with external contacts. In our business, such behavior would be considered industrial espionage." The word espionage hung in the air like a thunderclap. VP Patterson's face went ashen as the implications began to sink in. Derek looked like he was about to be sick, his confident demeanor completely shattered. "Dr. Mihajlovic," I continued in her language, "there's something else you should know about these security breaches. The person responsible has also been corresponding with your competitors, sharing details about this meeting and your potential business relationship with Cortec." Her expression hardened immediately. Industrial espionage was serious enough, but interference with international business negotiations crossed lines that could have legal ramifications in multiple countries. Derek made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "This is insane. I don't know what kind of lies Edith is telling you, but she's obviously trying to sabotage this deal to make me look bad." Dr. Mihailovich turned to face him with the kind of cold professional assessment that experienced executives use when evaluating untrustworthy business partners. "Mr. Patterson, your technical specialist has demonstrated more knowledge about cybersecurity in the past 10 minutes than you showed during the entire morning presentation. Perhaps you should listen to her analysis before making accusations." At that moment, the conference room door opened, and CEO Janet Rodriguez entered, clearly drawn by reports of chaos in our most important business meeting of the year. Janet was in her early 50s with silver hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that had built Cortec from nothing into a major regional player. "What's happening here?" she asked, taking in the scene. Derek, sweating and defensive Dr. Mihailovich, examining evidence on the presentation screen VP Patterson, looking mortified, and me standing at the center of it all with technical data that told a story of systematic betrayal. Darya Mihailovich stepped forward to address our CEO directly. "Miss Rodriguez, your employee Edith has discovered evidence of serious security breaches in your systems. We believe someone has been systematically stealing technical information and sharing it with external contacts, including our business competitors." Janet's expression went from confusion to serious concern in the span of a heartbeat. "Edith, what exactly have you found?" As I began explaining my discoveries to our CEO, switching between technical details and their business implications, I realized that Derek Patterson's attempts to destroy my career had actually created the perfect opportunity to expose his crimes. His public humiliation of me had forced me to defend myself with evidence that revealed his treachery to everyone who mattered. But the most satisfying moment came when Dr. Mihajlovic approached me during a brief pause in the technical explanation. "Edith," she said quietly, in her native language, "I believe we may have met before years ago at an embassy reception. Your father is Ambassador Richard Thompson, isn't he?" My heart stopped for a moment. After all these years of hiding my diplomatic background, someone had finally recognized me. The recognition in Dr. Mihajlovich's eyes sent a chill down my spine, but not from fear. Instead, I felt the strange relief that comes from being truly seen after years of deliberate invisibility. Her question about my father hung in the air between us, carrying implications that could reshape this entire crisis. "Yes," I replied softly in her language. "Ambassador Thompson is my father, though I haven't used his name professionally for obvious reasons." Dr. Mihailovich's expression shifted from professional curiosity to personal warmth mixed with understanding. "I remember you now. You were perhaps 15 or 16 at the ambassador's reception for the Technology Trade Summit. You translated for the younger attendees when the official interpreters were busy with the formal negotiations." The memory came flooding back with startling clarity. It had been one of those diplomatic social events that Dad insisted I attend, partly for cultural education and partly because embassy children were expected to represent American families abroad. I had indeed spent much of that evening helping other young people communicate across language barriers, treating it as a fun puzzle rather than serious work. "I remember thinking at the time," Dr. Mihajlovic continued, "that you had remarkable linguistic intuition for someone so young. You didn't just translate words, you conveyed cultural meaning and emotional context." Derek, who had been listening to this exchange with growing desperation, finally exploded. "What does any of this matter? So what if Edith speaks some foreign language? That doesn't change the fact that she's been sabotaging our systems and trying to ruin this deal." But CEO Janet Rodriguez had been following the conversation with increasing interest. "Edith, you speak Balkan languages fluently. How is this the first time anyone in this company has heard about this?" I felt the weight of years of deliberate concealment pressing down on me. I kept my linguistic background private because I wanted to build my career on technical merit, not family connections or perceived advantages. Dr. Mihailovich stepped forward, addressing Janet directly. "Miss Rodriguez, in our culture, we have great respect for people who choose to prove themselves through competence rather than inherited privilege. But perhaps more importantly for your business concerns, Edith has just demonstrated that she understands both the technical and cultural aspects of international cybersecurity better than anyone else in this room." She gestured toward the presentation screen where my analysis of Derek's security breaches was still displayed. "The evidence she has presented suggests that your company has been systematically compromised by someone with administrative access. In our business, we call this insider threat, and it represents one of the most serious forms of corporate espionage." Janet's expression hardened as the full implications became clear. Edith, can you prove that these security breaches were deliberate rather than accidental? I nodded, pulling up additional evidence from my research. The data access patterns show clear intentionality. Someone was specifically targeting client lists, technical specifications, and security protocols. The timing correlates with external communications that suggest coordination with outside contacts. As I walked through the technical evidence explaining each piece in detail, Derek's panic became increasingly obvious. He tried multiple times to interrupt or discredit my analysis, but his objections sounded increasingly desperate and uninformed. VP Patterson, meanwhile, was beginning to ask the kind of questions that showed he was taking the situation seriously. Edith, when you say external communications, are you suggesting that someone has been sharing confidential company information with competitors? More than suggesting, I replied, pulling up the encrypted email evidence I had discovered. I can show you specific communications where technical specifications were exchanged for cryptocurrency payments through offshore accounts. The room went completely silent. Corporate espionage was no longer theoretical, it was documented reality with financial evidence. Dr. Mihailovich examined the communication logs with professional interest. These encryption methods are consistent with patterns we've seen in industrial espionage cases across Eastern Europe. Someone has been very systematic about covering their tracks. Derek made one final, desperate attempt to shift blame away from himself. Even if someone has been stealing information, that doesn't mean it was me. Anyone could have used my administrative credentials. This could be a setup to make me look guilty. But Dr. Mihajlovic turned to face him with the kind of analytical stare that cut through lies like a laser through paper. Mr. Patterson, during our morning discussion, you attempted to greet us in Russian, apparently believing that all Eastern Europeans speak the same language. This demonstrates a fundamental lack of cultural and linguistic understanding that raises questions about your suitability for international business relationships. She paused, letting that assessment sink in before continuing. More concerning, when Edith began demonstrating real technical expertise, your immediate response was to attack her credibility rather than address the security issues she discovered. In our experience, such behavior often indicates someone who has something to hide. Janet stepped forward, her CEO instincts taking control of the situation. I think we need to suspend this meeting temporarily while we investigate these allegations thoroughly. Dr. Mihajlovic, would your team be willing to wait while we conduct an internal security audit? Actually, Dr. Mihajlovic replied, I believe we've learned enough about Cortex's real technical capabilities to make an informed decision about our potential partnership. My heart sank, assuming she was about to announce their withdrawal from negotiations. Derek's sabotage had succeeded in destroying the deal, even if it had also exposed his crimes. But Dr. Mihajlovic surprised everyone in the room with her next words. Edith has demonstrated precisely the kind of technical expertise and cultural competence that we value in international business partnerships. If Cortec is willing to assign her as the primary technical liaison for this project, we would be pleased to proceed with contract negotiations immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face went through a rainbow of colors, from white shock to red anger to gray despair. VP Patterson stared at his son with the kind of horrified understanding that comes from watching a career self-destruct in real time. Janet looked between me and the delegation with obvious calculation. Dr. Mihajlovic, are you suggesting that Edith's involvement would be a requirement for moving forward with this partnership? Not a requirement, Dr. Mihajlovic clarified, but certainly a strong preference. In our business, we have learned to work with people who demonstrate both technical competence and personal integrity. Edith has shown us both qualities in the past hour. Derek finally cracked completely, his desperation overriding whatever common sense he had left. This is ridiculous. Edith is just a technician. She doesn't have the authority or experience to handle major international contracts. My father and I have been developing this relationship for months. Dr. Mihailovic's response was delivered with the kind of cold precision that ends careers. Mr. Patterson, your development of this relationship has consisted primarily of providing us with inaccurate technical information and attempting to communicate in a language we don't speak. If that represents your company's standard of international business practice, perhaps we should reconsider this partnership entirely. The threat was clear and immediate. Cortex's largest potential contract was hanging by a thread, and that thread was connected directly to Derek's competence and credibility. Janet made the kind of executive decision that defines successful leadership. Dr. Mihajlovic, I think we should definitely explore the possibility of restructuring our technical team for this project. But first, I need to understand the full scope of these security issues that Edith has discovered. As the meeting transitioned from international negotiation to corporate crisis management, I realized that my careful plan to expose Derek's crimes was working better than I had ever imagined. But I also understood that the next few hours would determine not just Derek's fate, but the entire future trajectory of my career at Cortec. The game was no longer about saving my job from Derek's false accusations. It had become about proving that competence and integrity could triumph over nepotism and corruption, even in the complex world of corporate politics. And Dr. Mihailovic's recognition of my background had given me something I hadn't expected: validation that my choice to rebuild my career from the ground up had been worth the sacrifice. What happened next moved with the swift precision of a well-orchestrated investigation. Janet Rodriguez had immediately called for Marcus Williams and Sarah Chen to join us, along with Tom Bradley from our IT security division. Within 20 minutes, the conference room had transformed into an impromptu forensics lab, with laptops and network analyzers spread across the mahogany table like high-tech evidence in a criminal trial. Dr. Mihailovic and her delegation remained to observe the investigation, their presence serving as both witnesses and stakeholders in whatever we discovered. I could see the professional fascination in their eyes as they watched our security team work through the evidence I had compiled. Marcus, our network administrator, was the first to confirm my findings. Edith, this data access pattern you identified is definitely not normal user behavior. Someone has been systematically downloading client databases, technical specifications, and security protocols over the past 6 months. Sarah added her analysis of the financial systems. The cryptocurrency transactions are real, and they correlate exactly with the dates of major data downloads. We're looking at approximately $80,000 in payments from offshore accounts. Tom Bradley, our security specialist, was examining the encrypted communications I had discovered. These emails are definitely written in some kind of foreign language, but they're not showing up properly in our standard translation systems. I stepped forward to help with the translation, switching between English and Balkan dialect as I worked through Derek's communications with his criminal contacts. Tom, the emails are discussing specific core tech projects, client information, and competitive intelligence. There are also references to sabotaging today's meeting with the Adriatic delegation. Dr. Mihailovic leaned forward with sharp interest. Could you read those specific references aloud in our language, if possible? As I translated Derek's plans to undermine the international negotiations, the delegation members exchanged glances that could have frozen water. They were hearing documented evidence that someone at Cortec had been actively working against their potential partnership. Derek, meanwhile, had been growing increasingly agitated as the evidence mounted against him. This is all circumstantial. You can't prove that I sent those emails or made those financial transactions. Anyone could have used my computer access. But VP Patterson was looking at his son with the kind of dawning horror that comes from watching someone you love destroy themselves. Derek, just stop talking, please. Janet had been taking detailed notes throughout the investigation, and her CEO instincts were clearly processing the legal and business implications of what we were discovering. Tom, what kind of criminal exposure are we looking at here? Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets? Wire fraud, money laundering? Tom replied grimly. If these communications are authentic, we're talking about federal crimes that could result in decades of prison time. Dr. Mihailovich addressed the room with the authority of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. In our experience with international cybersecurity investigations, this type of systematic data theft typically involves coordination with organized criminal networks. The encryption methods and financial structures suggest professional level espionage operations. Derek's last vestige of composure finally crumbled. Okay, fine. Maybe I shared some technical information with outside contacts. But that's not espionage. That's just business networking. Everyone does it. The silence that followed his admission was deafening. VP Patterson closed his eyes as if he couldn't bear to look at his son anymore. Janet's expression had gone from concern to cold fury, the kind of anger that comes from discovering that someone you trusted has been systematically betraying you. But Derek wasn't finished digging his own grave. And even if I did make some mistakes, that doesn't change the fact that Edith has been sabotaging company systems to make me look bad. She's the one who caused today's technical failures. I had been waiting for this moment, and I stepped forward with the kind of calm confidence that comes from having irrefutable evidence. Derek, the technical failures during your presentation weren't caused by sabotage. They were caused by the unauthorized software you installed yesterday afternoon, software that created security vulnerabilities in our main systems. Pulling up the installation logs on the main presentation screen, I walked through the technical evidence step by step. The software you installed was designed to create backdoor access to our network, probably to make your data theft activities easier. But you didn't understand the compatibility requirements, so instead of creating covert access, you created a cascade of security alerts that exposed your criminal activities. Dr. Mihailovich actually smiled at this explanation. So his attempt to improve his espionage capabilities actually led to his exposure. There is a certain poetic justice to that outcome. Derek's face had gone completely white, but he made one final desperate attempt to shift blame. My father knew about everything. He was helping me develop business relationships with international contacts. This was all approved corporate strategy. The accusation against VP Patterson hit the room like an explosion. Derek had just thrown his own father under the bus in a desperate attempt to save himself from federal prosecution. But VP Patterson's response surprised everyone, including his son. Instead of denying the accusation or defending Derek's actions, he stood up slowly and addressed Janet with quiet dignity. Janet, I need to tell you something that I should have revealed months ago. I've been aware that Derek was struggling in his position, and I've been trying to protect him from the consequences of his incompetence. But I had no knowledge of any criminal activities or theft of company information. He turned to look at his son with profound sadness. Derek, I've covered for your mistakes and defended your poor performance because I love you. But I will not be accused of corporate crimes to protect you from the consequences of your own choices. The betrayal on Derek's face was total and devastating. His father's refusal to enable his lies had left him completely isolated with no allies and no credibility remaining. Janet Rodriguez made the kind of executive decision that would define her legacy as CEO. Derek Patterson, you are terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and we will be turning over all evidence of your criminal activities to federal law enforcement. She turned to VP Patterson with visible regret. Michael, given the circumstances and the questions about your oversight responsibilities, I'm going to need you to take a leave of absence while we conduct a full investigation into the scope of these security breaches. VP Patterson nodded with resignation. I understand, Janet. And for what it's worth, I'm deeply sorry that my son's actions have put this company and these business relationships at risk. Dr. Mihailovich stepped forward to address the aftermath. Ms. Rodriguez, we appreciate your swift action to address these security concerns. However, we still need to determine whether CoreTech has the technical leadership necessary to handle the cybersecurity requirements of our potential partnership. All eyes turned to me as the implications became clear. The delegation was essentially asking whether I could step into the leadership role that Derek and VP Patterson had vacated. Janet looked at me with obvious calculation. Edith, given your technical expertise and linguistic abilities, would you be interested in accepting a promotion to Director of International Technical Relations? The offer hung in the air like a golden opportunity wrapped in professional validation. After years of hiding my abilities and accepting lesser roles, I was being offered the chance to use my full potential in service of the company I genuinely cared about. But before I could respond, Derek made one final desperate attempt to destroy everything I had worked for. She can't handle that responsibility. Edith is just a technician who got lucky with some foreign language skills. She doesn't understand real business leadership. Dr. Mihailovich's response was delivered with the kind of finality that ends all debate. Mr. Patterson, in the past 2 hours, Edith has demonstrated technical expertise, cultural competence, professional integrity, and crisis management skills that exceeded the combined performance of everyone else in this room. If CoreTech is wise enough to recognize her value, we look forward to working with her on this project. She turned to address me directly, speaking in her native language with obvious respect. Edith, would you be willing to serve as our primary technical liaison for this partnership? We believe you understand both the technical requirements and cultural considerations necessary for successful international cooperation. As I looked around the room, taking in the expectant faces of the delegation, the supportive expressions of my colleagues, and Derek's defeated hostility, I realized that this moment represented more than just a career opportunity. It was validation that competence and integrity could triumph over nepotism and corruption. It was proof that hiding your abilities serves no one, least of all yourself. And it was the chance to use my unique background in service of something meaningful and important. Dr. Mihajlovic, I replied in her language, I would be honored to serve as technical liaison for this partnership, and I promise you that CoreTech's technical capabilities will exceed your expectations. The smile that spread across her face was worth more than any salary increase or job title. It was the recognition of one professional by another based purely on demonstrated competence and earned respect. Derek Patterson had tried to destroy my career to protect his crimes. Instead, he had given me the perfect opportunity to reveal my true capabilities and earn the kind of professional recognition that can never be taken away. As security guards arrived to escort Derek from the building, I realized that justice had been served in the most satisfying way possible through the natural consequences of competence triumphing over corruption. 6 months later, I stood in that same conference room, but everything about it felt different. The mahogany table was covered with contracts written in 3 different languages, signed agreements that represented the most successful international partnership in CoreTech's history. Through the windows, Seattle's skyline sparkled in the afternoon sunlight, a view that had become my daily backdrop as Director of International Technical Relations. The Adriatic Tech Solutions partnership had exceeded everyone's expectations, generating not just the original $25 million contract, but additional opportunities worth over $60 million across multiple Eastern European markets. Our combined cybersecurity solutions were being implemented by major corporations from Prague to Belgrade, with expansion plans that stretched into the next 5 years. Dr. Mihailovic had become more than just a business partner. She had evolved into a mentor and friend who helped me understand how to leverage my unique background for maximum professional impact. Her guidance had been invaluable as I navigated the complex world of international business relationships. Edith, she said, reviewing the latest project reports, your team's performance on the Belgrade data center implementation was exceptional. The client specifically requested that you lead the next phase of their security upgrade. I smiled, thinking about how far we had all come. Sarah Chen had been promoted to senior systems analyst and was now leading our domestic technical operations. Marcus Williams had been appointed as my deputy director, bringing his network expertise to our international projects. Both of them had thrived in the merit-based environment that Janet Rodriguez had implemented throughout the company. The aftermath of Derek Patterson's arrest had been swift and thorough. Federal investigators had uncovered a sophisticated corporate espionage network that stretched across multiple companies and countries. Derek was currently serving a 7-year prison sentence for theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, and money laundering. His cooperation with investigators had helped dismantle the entire criminal organization, but it hadn't reduced his own legal consequences. VP Michael Patterson had resigned from Cortec after a comprehensive investigation revealed that while he wasn't criminally involved in his son's activities, his failure to provide adequate oversight had enabled the security breaches. He had accepted responsibility for his management failures and quietly transitioned to a consulting role with a smaller firm. Janet Rodriguez had used the crisis as an opportunity to transform Cortec's corporate culture, implementing new policies that emphasize technical competence over family connections or corporate politics. The company had not only survived the scandal, but had emerged stronger and more focused on actual performance. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the past 6 months had been watching Derek's former colleagues respond to the new environment. Without his toxic influence and nepotistic protection, the IT department had become a collaborative, innovative team that consistently exceeded performance targets. As I prepared for another international presentation, this time to potential partners from 3 different countries, I reflected on the lessons that Derek Patterson's downfall had taught me about authenticity and courage. For years, I had hidden my linguistic abilities and diplomatic background because I wanted to prove myself through technical merit alone. But I had learned that authenticity doesn't require choosing between different aspects of your identity. The most powerful professional relationships are built on bringing your full self to the work, not hiding parts of who you are. My father's diplomatic scandal had taught me to be wary of using family connections for professional advancement. But Derek's criminal behavior had shown me the difference between leveraging inherited privilege and using earned skills in service of legitimate goals. The courage to speak up when Derek was destroying company security hadn't just saved my job. It had revealed opportunities I never could have imagined while hiding in the background. Standing up to workplace bullying and corporate corruption had opened doors that years of quiet competence alone never would have accessed. Dr. Mihailovich entered the conference room for our final meeting of the day, accompanied by representatives from our newest potential partners. As we began discussions in 4 different languages, smoothly transitioning between English Balkan dialects, German, and French, as the conversation required, I marveled at how natural it felt to use all of my abilities in service of meaningful work. Edith, Dr. Mihajlovic said as the meeting concluded, I have something to tell you that I think you'll find interesting. Last month, I had occasion to meet with several other technology executives at a conference in Vienna. Your reputation for technical excellence and cultural competence has spread throughout our industry. She paused with a smile that suggested good news. 3 different companies have specifically requested information about potentially working with you on international projects. Your name has become synonymous with successful cross-cultural technology partnerships. The recognition felt surreal after years of deliberate invisibility, but it also felt earned through competence and integrity rather than inherited connections or political manipulation. As I walked home that evening through Seattle's bustling streets, I thought about Derek Patterson and wondered if he had learned anything from his spectacular fall from grace. Prison had a way of teaching humility to people who had never experienced real consequences for their actions. But mostly, I felt grateful for the unexpected gift his attack on my career had represented. By forcing me to defend myself with evidence and expertise, Derek had inadvertently created the perfect opportunity for me to demonstrate my true capabilities. The young woman who had hidden her diplomatic background and linguistic abilities out of fear and shame had evolved into a confident professional who understood that authentic success comes from using all of your talents in service of something larger than yourself. Corporate nepotism and workplace bullying can create toxic environments that discourage honest feedback and critical thinking. But they also create opportunities for people with genuine competence and integrity to shine by comparison. Derek Patterson had tried to use his father's position to destroy my career because I threatened his incompetent mediocrity. Instead, he had given me the platform to prove that in the long run, competence and character always triumph over corruption and connections. Sometimes the best revenge against workplace injustice isn't plotting or scheming. Sometimes it's simply being so undeniably good at what you do that truth becomes impossible to ignore. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone tried to undermine your career only to accidentally create an opportunity for you to shine? I'd love to hear about how you turned workplace challenges into professional victories. Please share your stories in the comments below and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Thank you for joining me on this journey of standing up to corporate corruption and discovering the power of authentic professional courage. I hope it inspires you to use all of your talents and abilities, even when it feels safer to hide them. Remember, your unique background and skills are not weaknesses to be concealed. They're strengths to be leveraged in service of meaningful work. Subscribe for more stories about turning professional challenges into personal triumphs, and share this video with anyone who needs encouragement to stand up for themselves in toxic workplace situations. Until next time, keep fighting for integrity and competence in everything you do. The world needs more people who are willing to speak truth to power, especially when doing so requires real courage and personal risk.